Okay, welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about something very different in the beginning. I know the last couple of weeks we have been talking about CPI research and been showing you some of the amazing images that we've captured over the years. Don't worry, we'll end up getting back to that in other shows. We have actually years and years of footage and research and images to show you from our outside research. But someone the other day asked me about actors in movies and the legend that's been out there about certain movies having cursed on the actors after the movie had ended or while the actual movie was actually being filmed. And I didn't know really much about it. I mean, like anyone else over the years, you actually hear something about, films being cursed and but I've never really looked into it too much. So anyway, so I decided to take, some of the five, most popular movies. I don't know if they're the most popular or not, but five movies that actually came to mind that I actually recalled, and just kind of look into those and to see if, there was any stories about actors being cursed, during or after the picture had aired, and if there was any deaths or anything associated. But anyway, so I went and my very first one that I decided to look at was, of course, The Exorcist. I mean, to me, at this age and this time in my life, I still fear the movie The Exorcist. Like, if it's on and it's late at night, I won't watch it. If it's on and it's 12 noon on a bright sunny day, I won't watch it. Um, I just felt that I watched it enough in my life that I don't want my mind to go back to those disturbing images that I see in that film. Especially now that I'm older and I really look at Linda Blair, who played Raven in that movie, and just imagine, what she had to go through to, as a child actor to create those scenes that must have just been incredible. Well, when I was doing research on this, I actually found out that they or she actually did have a lot of problems, and also the film crew as well had a lot of difficulties during the filming of The Exorcist. I didn't know that they actually had a fire after they started filming, and it burned down a lot of the set for the interior, like the different rooms, living room, kitchen, and all that had all burned. And one room that didn't burn, that was part of the set, was the bedroom of Raven that Linda Blair played that character, and where all the most disturbing scenes of that movie took place. That was interesting to me. And if you think about what I have talked about on previous shows, really, actually, the first episode of Paranormal Diagnostic, and then I think the second episode, not the bonus, but the actual second episode where I revisit Elton and the boys, I talk about how being in an environment um, can be very detrimental to this type of filming. I talk about how entities do not understand sarcasm. And when I talk about sarcasm, I'm talking about not being sarcastic, but I talk about sarcasm in nature. Meaning, if you're out in nature and you are doing something that nature would deem to be offensive to them. On this channel, we considered nature being a positive influence in the world, and we deem anything that occurs inside a structure as being negative, right? We kind of just simplify it like that. Of course, it is a lot more complex than that, but that's how we just simplify it for this: negatives inside, positives outside. And if you were out in nature and you were doing anything like Elton and those guys were by bringing that spirit board that I talked about out there, nature does not understand sarcasm, and they don't know that you are joking or kidding around or playing, or that board is not real. Because if you believe and if you act in a manner that seems to be real, regardless if you're acting or not, when you do something like that and you're doing it out in nature, nature does not understand sarcasm, and they will deem what you're doing as actually being factual. So that was the problem that Elton and his boys ran into in episode 1. And then in episode 2, I go back and I touch upon that. Well, in this situation, if you're an actor, and it doesn't matter if you're out in nature filming or you're inside a structure, because if you believe in what CPI has been discovering in these last 15 going on 16 years, you will believe that this spirit energy exists in both locations. So nature is offended when you take something out to their world of bliss. They don't want it out there. And if you take it inside a structure, they want to be part of what you're putting down. So in this case, The Exorcist, you have a young girl who is possessed by a demonic force. These entities, as I just explained, do not get sarcasm. They do not get theater. They don't understand thespians. Only thing they understand is that you are basically, meaning the actors and the director and the cast members, are speaking their language. There's nothing that takes place about an exorcism that would be positive. When you take that, stick it inside, even if it's a movie studio, that movie studio would have paranormal activity inside, even though it's never been reported. And even if it didn't have it, they would show up. So someone like Linda Blair, that was just a child when this went on, is on this set filming this incredibly intense movie scenes where she's green, her eyes are a different color, she looks and appears like death. They have recordings that are playing in there that makes it sound like she's speaking in tongues. And everyone in there is doing such a good job that it's believable. We know it's believable because that's what affected the audience. That's what made that movie so successful back in 1973. No one had seen demonic possession terror like that until that movie came out. It was just something that maybe people talked about, whispered about. I don't know if a lot of people even discussed it back then. They definitely discussed it after the fact. Hollywood made sure of that. Why? Because it did so well. And it also made directors and writers to try to duplicate that success. Some could, some could not. Linda Blair doesn't even like to talk about the movie The Exorcist. As far as I know, to this day, she is still getting over those effects. After they had the fire that happened on the set, the production company brought in an actual priest and had to do a blessing on the set and that little girl. During one of the scenes, when Linda Blair's on the bed The scene got so intense that an unseen force literally pushed that child out of the bed onto the floor. And filming didn't stop. They continued with the movie. Everyone's under contract. The movie's got to be done. We don't know what happened to you. Get back in bed. We got to continue the scene. At least that's what's being reported. I wasn't there. I honestly don't know. But from what I have seen, and just what we've talked about on this channel, just what Elton and the boys went through in Maryland, could it be possible that during filming, an entity that got so wrapped up in what they were doing because that entity wanted to be part of it? It wanted to make it real. Just like Eldon and the boys. You go out there, you bring a $40 cheap spear board, you're trying to play joke on your friend, but you make the environment real because you believe and you're out there. You say a bunch of chants you shouldn't say. They're saying a bunch of lines in this movie that sound authentic, that is designed to terrify every theater person in that audience. They got the best writers. They got the best actors. They got the best makeup crews. And they got the best audio. Who would not believe by watching that scene, if you did not know that they were acting, that it wasn't real? Vera Farmiga was the lady that was in The Conjuring. The Conjuring came out in 2013. I always call this lady the lady with the crybaby eyes. It always looks like her eyes are watering up and she's about to cry. This lady initially didn't want to do this film. But I'm sure in Hollywood, even back in 2013, women probably couldn't turn down a lot of roles, especially something that would be as lucrative and as promising as this. It doesn't mean that they wanted to do it or she wanted to do it, because it didn't really sound like it from what I read, that she was extremely thrilled about playing Lorraine Warren in this movie. I think that was her character in The Conjuring. But she did it because she's an actress or an actor, and that was the role that she was presented. And she did a great job, but she did have problems in that movie. She made claims that the laptop that she was using on set, when she had gone back to it, it had 3 scratches in it that were on the screen. She probably at the time didn't think that much of it until she had returned back to New York where she lived, and she woke up the next morning. She had 3 similar scratches on her upper leg or her thigh area. And she witnessed items being misplaced in her house. So she believes that it had to do with the film that she was in. But once again, it wouldn't be the film itself. It would be the script, the lines that they're delivering, that makes what they're saying seem so real to an entity who doesn't understand sarcasm. Sarcasm based on acting. They don't know the difference. Every intense scene that you do more than once, it's not like it's a real scene where someone yells something and someone believes they're possessed and they're screaming in the bed. That's one thing, because that whole event may only take place in a half hour, and it may never take place again in another year. Where when you're on set and you have directors and they want you to do it several different ways, you get to say the same thing over and over again. And generally, you say it more intensely each time you do it. The director wants you to give more passion, more fear in your voice. So that's what they do. More fear, more passion. And you know what that is equal to? More energy, more heat being expelled from you into that environment, making that environment more exhilarated. So if you have entities that are there watching, because what did I say? They don't get sarcasm. And each time you say that line, whatever it is, the same line is supposed to get everyone terrified in the theater. These entities that are in there are growing stronger. And they like what you say. So when you leave, they feel they're missing something. They're already negative entities to begin with. They're in there for a reason. Most likely because they were rejected from nature. So when these scenes are done at these locations, it's what they've been waiting for. Acknowledgement from the living, giving them purpose outside of all the other negative entities that they're in there with. So they want to gravitate towards that. They do. They gravitate right home with those actors. I only looked up 5 movies, and all 5 movie actors all had problems after the filming. Many of them had problems during the filming. Another one I looked at was Jobeth Williams. You might remember her. She is the lady from Poltergeist. She was the mother. That movie came out in 1982. Once again, one of those great movies, terrifying. Well, the most terrifying movies are terrifying for a reason. And all of those movies that were terrifying, that were really great, that are legendary now, as far as I can tell, all the actors and actresses, I think they just call them actors now, had problems. Once they got home, some of them were experiencing activity while on the set and at home. But something that I learned about this movie was completely disturbing. And listen, I don't know if this is true or not, because everything that I discovered about this movie was from the internet. So, to be honest, I don't know if what I'm about to tell you is true. But if it is, it's a bit disturbing. Only because of what I know about this realm now. Actually, it probably would have been disturbing before I knew about this realm. But I don't know if it's true, but I'll just tell you what I read. When the lady, Jobeth Williams, goes and jumps into the pool, I think she's looking for her daughter. I think it was when her daughter goes into the closet and she disappears and nobody knows where she's at. At some point, she either gets tossed into the pool outside or she runs into the pool. I don't remember. It's been years since I've watched it. But anyways, she ends up in the pool. And what comes up out of the brown, muddy water are skeleton remains, human remains, that float up around her. Now, it was reported that Steven Spielberg, who was the director and the producer of this, for some reason, if it's true, and I don't know, used real human remains in that scene. Come on. I hope that isn't true, because I don't even see why that would even be important to do. Nobody would know the difference between a plastic prop or human remains. Anyone who's ever seen that we just assume that they were just made out of wax and plastic and pieces of coat hanger. I don't think anybody thought, wow, that's a really good effect. Thank God they used real cadavers in there. So I don't know if that's true or if it's just something they said online. I hope it isn't, but just imagine the effect that doing that would have on entities who are already interested in all the lines that the actors are saying and the environment that is being set up and all the negativity that has to come with producing a film like that. I mean, you have to get into character. And once you get into character, nobody, meaning these entities that are around you, do not get sarcasm. They don't know you're kidding. They don't know you're acting. They think the environment's real. If you take real items, like real human remains, an entity most likely would be able to tell the difference. So this lady was surrounded by them. And of course, she felt haunted after this movie. And how could she not feel haunted? I mean, being surrounded by that and then going home at night. I don't know if she knew that they were real. Maybe they didn't tell her. I mean, who knows? And if they did tell her, how does that make you feel? I mean, acting is just a job. It's something you go to and something you come home to, just like any other job. But in this scenario, making these types of movies where the locations could have activity, but even if they don't, it would almost be like ringing a dinner bell. For anything in the area, the energy would radiate out of that and affect maybe entities that are in the next town over or the next cemetery over that could come there. I mean, we don't know. There's no control about these things. If it's happening outside, nature doesn't want it out there. So those entities are going to show up. And if those entities need to follow you home to keep you from coming back into their environment, meaning outside, they will haunt you as well. As far as this channel is concerned, we always say we don't know if anything that we're discovering is real. We always say we don't know if the images that we are capturing are definitive proof of an existing of an afterlife. But if we're right, and what we're capturing is, and how the spirits out in nature will try to run the living out of there when they're not supposed to be there, number one. Number two, if they're there doing something that nature doesn't like, they will try to run them out of there. Nature will follow you home, and they will try to prevent you from coming back out there. So there's no guarantee that whatever followed these people home was necessarily from inside a house. So the next film that I looked at was a film with Jennifer Carpenter. You may remember her. She was the sister that played on the cable show Dexter, where he played a serial killer. She was in the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I actually have never seen this. I've heard of it. But I actually saw her photograph come up, and that's why I actually looked into that. And she, it seems like that movie was extremely intense. Of course, anything that has the exorcism of anything in it would be. But this lady actually had a very difficult time as well during and after the filming of this project. She said that her and a couple other cast members would experience electronic issues at home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like she said that her radio would cut on at 3 o'clock, and some of the other members of the film as well reported that their TVs and radios would cut on at 3 o'clock. So there was an important scene about 3 o'clock being kind of like the witching hour in this movie. And it's interesting that all this activity was happening while they were at home at 3 o'clock, or 3 a.m. And it wouldn't surprise me because once again, you're an actress or an actor, and you're creating these amazing, emotional, driven scenes in an environment where these entities could exist, and they're watching this. And the scenes that are taking place inside a structure would be the entities that we consider the negative entities that would be in agreement with what you're doing and want to be part of that. And it's almost like someone who decides to hurt themselves and cut themselves, and a bunch of people showing up and saying, yeah, we'll help you do that. You want us to punch and kick you and cut you with a razor blade? Sure, we're into that. We'll be happy to oblige. And we think that's what occurs. And then if the scenes are shot outside, like I said before, nature says, we don't want you here. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure you don't come back tomorrow. And if following you home is part of what we have to do, that's what we'll do. So they get caught up. So why is 3 o'clock important? Because they said it's important in the movie. And at 3 o'clock, it's designed to scare everyone, including the people in the audience. So these entities say, 3 o'clock it is. Clearly 3 o'clock is the time where everyone's supposed to get scared. So we're going to follow them home, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to scare them at 3 o'clock. There's no surprise that I just picked 5 movies, and every actor and crew in all 5 movies that I picked report of things happening after the fact. Some of these people are having long-term effects. Some of them have never gotten over the effects that were in these movies. We're not talking about a boxing movie. We're not talking about a war movie. We're talking about supernatural movies, paranormal activity. You can make a war movie. You don't have Japanese soldiers that are standing in your bedroom over your bed at night, turning on your radio. But you make a supernatural movie or a paranormal movie and watch what happens. And that's what seems to be going on with all of these people. So the last one we looked at was Amityville Horror. Again, one of my favorites. When this came out in 1979, and I remember begging my father to go see this. He said, you don't want to go see this movie. It's too scary for you. He said, you're already too squeamish as it is. I'm like, Pops, I want to see it. Take me to see it. He kept saying no. So it was me and I think my best friend, and he took us to see it. And I remember I was sitting on the aisle seat, and then it was my father, and then I think it was my friend on the other side. I think it was just us 3 that went to see it. And I had begged him, and he says, you don't want to see this movie. I'm like, yes, I do. Even though I was terrified, I was fascinated then. It was a movie. I was at the age. And I remember being seated next to him. And I remember it got to the part where they're outside, and James Brolin is looking up at the house. And inside, he sees the eyes of, I think, the pig that had been reported called Jody. And you see these little 2 like blue dot or purple dotted eyes move past the window. And at that point, I had stood up and told my father, sir, I have to use the bathroom. And I remember him reaching up, grabbing my shoulder and slamming me back down in the seat and leaning over and whispered without even looking at me, your ass wanted to see it, you're going to watch. And I remember sitting there and I started slowly like trying to put my hands up over my face. And I remember him reaching over and went, He never looked at me the whole time. He kept looking up at the screen, and he put my hands down on my thighs, and says, "You wanted to see it. You're gonna watch." And he was right. I watched, and I didn't want to see it, and he was right. I wish I had never gone. I don't know why that movie just terrified me. And it didn't really start until I saw that, those eyes moving up in that window. For me, being outside and looking into any structure like that and seeing something move around inside when you know no one's in there, to me is one of the most scarier things that I could imagine happening. I would hate to come home knowing no one's supposedly to be in my place, and if I saw something like that, it would just be, I don't know if I could ever go back in there ever again. And but James Brolin did that movie, and even this guy reported having incidents after the effect. He reported objects that would be moved in his house after that for a long time after. Probably now he's probably not dealing with the effects. And my theory is these things can occur, and they can follow you home until either one, they feel that you've learned your lesson, or two, they have all the time in the world. Uh, our theory is time doesn't necessarily exist for them, and they can lie dormant for as long as they want. Just because activity stops, you can say, well, we haven't had activity 15, 20 years. It doesn't mean that these things are not in your house. They have all the time in the world. And I remember telling someone that if someone is being haunted by these things and they have, say, a priest comes in and blesses the house and the activity stops, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It just means they have all the time in the world. They can lie dormant, and they can wait till you're on your deathbed. And they could come back and no longer be dormant and to make you miserable in your hour where you can't even speak based on, whatever type of medical condition you're going through. So once they're in a house, you're not getting rid of them. A priest can come, someone can bless your house, and they can choose to lie dormant. Sometimes as humans, we do things that we know it's wrong, and sometimes when somebody brings it to our attention, we can see how we're wrong about what we're doing. That wouldn't be any different to what has carried over. These entities are no different than us because they are who we are. So we are someone who had a dark heart in life. We would have a dark heart when we transitioned over. But it doesn't mean that we would be brutal all the time. I mean, even the toughest bastards in the world have good days. So even these entities that are stuck in these houses, even though they were rejected by nature, they could see how what they were doing to the living was wrong. And they could stop. But it doesn't mean they can go anywhere. It just means they could stop. But it doesn't mean that it can't start again. So when we look at what we're doing, we have to understand that these entities are us. Some people will join cults and feel very comfortable with those cults. Sometimes they'll go out and they'll do things because of these cults or these gangs, and they'll murder people and they'll take lives and kill children. It's okay with them. They have no remorse. So you make a movie that is basically speaking their language. They're more than happy to put you through that terror. You pretend like you're possessed, they're more than happy to come over to your house and continue it. They didn't hear the director say cut, and if they did, they don't care. So that's what we find. We find, at least out of just the 5, I picked 5, and all 5 actors or the film crews all had problems. And my guess is if I pick 5 more, there will be reports for that. But I don't think these are just advertisements. I really believe these people are having these problems. Just like what we saw with Elton and those boys in Maryland, in Burkittsville. They went into a real environment, and they're not as intense as we see in a movie. I mean, some of these scenes, you feel that intensity coming off that screen. So you can imagine being there, hearing the pitch of someone's voice as it carries and it echoes off the walls. Some of these houses and locations are real. Some of them are just sets that are set up. It's not going to matter. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because someone brought it to my attention. And I had no idea, but I'm not surprised. You make films like this. You put these amazing actors in these films with amazing screenwriting. I mean, the lighting is spot on. And you have these actors belt out these amazing, horrible lines about God and the devil and the demons and all of that. Someone's going to show up. And it seems like in every movie, at least going back to the 70s, out of the 5 that I've chosen, someone did show up. And these people have suffered for it. And some today are still dealing with that. You want to be an actor for horror movies? Go right ahead. Just be prepared. So tonight, let's get on with our show. Hi, I am TD McRoy. This is Paranormal Diagnostic. Let's get started. Okay, we're in the Gundry Sanitarium in Baltimore, Maryland, and the organization that we're following today is called Uncharted Travel. And not really sure how many people actually make up Uncharted Travel. It really wasn't that clear when I looked at their channel. But there's actually 3 gentlemen that are actually doing this investigation in this sanatorium. And apparently it was initially something that was organized for women, this facility. And later on, it was changed into a facility for children. But apparently that didn't really last that long. But like as usual, we're going to put the link down below so you guys can definitely go back and watch the video. So we want to get straight into this. So one of the first scenes that we come upon where we get a hit by the Iroquois Technology is this image right here. And what you're looking at is directly in front of him is a glare from, it had rained a little bit, and we believe that the camera lens is has moisture on it. And because of that, as this gentleman walks by, the glare from his hoodie actually is reflecting off the light from the camera and reflecting off the lens, and it ends up leaving this image. And as they walk, you'll be able to tell that's exactly what that is. But remember, these entities have the ability to see from our perspective. So if we have moisture on our lens and they want to move along with us, they will use that moisture on that lens and as camouflage. And that's exactly what happened here, because the Iroquois Technology got a hit, and it got a hit directly in front of him. But once we applied the dynamic filtration, this is what came up. And you can see right there in a close-up, there's actually a face of a woman. And you can see the left eye, right eye, nose, and the mouth, and apparently it looks like she's wearing a hat. And you can see her hair hanging down. And that is actually the same image as I just showed you before. This is just once the dynamic filtration was able to do what it does. And so, yeah, so we pull up a face immediately. Then they travel around. They're still looking for a way to get in, and they go around the far side of this building they're trying to get in, and the Iroquois Technology gets a hit on this little area. It looks like there's a door, and it comes out. And there's maybe like three steps to go down to the ground, probably just an exit door, and we get a hit right there. And you can kind of see something blurred up. So we apply the dynamic filtration, and it comes up with this. Now, we don't know what it is. It looks like the figure of a man, and you can see the arm here, and it's a very large body, and you can actually see the face. Um, but yeah, so that's what we got there in that hit. And so they travel on, and they make their way inside. And they're in the, like, I don't know, the foyer area, and they're walking by, and when the cameraman pans back, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit where an open door is. It's just barely open, and it gets a hit in there. And when we zoom in, this is what we see. And you can see immediately it appears to be some type of figure in there. To us, it looks like a woman, or just from looking at it right here. And we end up applying the dynamic filtration to it. And when we do that, there you go. You can see how it actually kind of pulls out the eyes a little bit, the whites of the eyes. And so, yeah, there's a figure there. You can see her hair, you can see her face, you can see her arms. They look like they're kind of crossed there. Okay, moving on. We the gentleman's looking at this fireplace, and in this back hallway here, or that back room back there, he actually hears something come from there. And he turns to the guys and looks at them and said, "Did you guys hear that?" So as he turns and starts to head over that direction, once again, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit. So we zoom in, and we use the dynamic filtration, and you can see this dark area right here. That's where the Iroquois Technology hit. So once we apply the dynamic filtration, you can get a good look right there of a man, and he's almost looks like he's in agony a little bit. His mouth is open. He's looking upward. It's almost like he's speaking or trying to yell to someone else that's actually back there with him. But that was a good hit because that's exactly what the man said. The man said, "Did you hear that?" And generally, when these people, through all the investigations that we do, claim to hear some type of noise, you know, 7 out of 10 times there will be something that's either in that frame or will come into that frame at some point. So, like we said, these people are actually hearing these noises. They are not making them up. It's not part of their imagination. I mean, the human senses are really ideal. Most of the time, we deny our own human senses that we have. If we see something, we go, "Did I see that?" If we hear something, we question ourselves. But the truth of it is, when we think we see something, now we may not see exactly what we thought we saw, but when we think we see something out of the right corner of our eye or fly by, that's generally correct. Our senses are right on track, but we deny them. And it's just so simple to deny something when you think you see something and you turn and look that direction and there's nothing there. So immediately we all, from children into our adolescent stage, all the way to adult and elderly stage, we believe that our senses are not functioning the way they should be. But in most cases, what we're starting to learn, at least from this type of research we're doing and from our perspective, that people's senses are right on. I don't know how many times that we have watched ghost hunters and different people deny what the Iroquois Technology later discovers. So, we just tell people when you're in those situations, trust your feeling, because what we're discovering more times than not, you're actually seeing something. Moving on. So they walk around and they're going from room to room, and they see an old mirror, and it's got this like kind of burlap looking thing on it, and this one gentleman pulls it back, and when he does that, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit. Now you can see right here, that is the older gentleman that's with him. There's like two 20, 30-year-olds, something like that, and he's a lot older. He might be in his mid or late 40s. And but the Iroquois Technology gets a hit right next to him. So we zoom in and we come up with this image. Well, we go, all right, clearly there looks like there's something there. The Iroquois Technology already told us that it got a hit. So the only thing left for us to do in this situation is to apply the dynamic filtration. And we did, and we came up with this. And you can see there is a woman. There may be a gentleman next to her, but it's definitely a woman. And you can see her, it's almost like she's wearing pantyhose that have slipped down, but she's still wearing them. They haven't, fallen all the way down. And they look like they're old and they've been ripped, and they're almost dingy looking or dirty looking or something. There's something about her legs that we don't believe that is her legs. It's almost like she's wearing not pantyhose, but maybe like some type of stockings on there, and like a thicker than pantyhose type of, like maybe white stockings or something. And they have they show a lot of, almost something that you would see during the Great Depression. Someone who was down on their luck and out, and hadn't eaten in a couple days or a week or so, and the rest of her actually kind of matches that. So remember, a lot of these images and these entities that we are capturing, what we believe we're capturing, can be from any time period. As far as we know, there is no such thing as time as far as they're concerned. And because of that, the Iroquois Technology has hit on things from hundreds of thousands of years, we believe. Remember, we caught the Mount Owen Moa left leg or left foot there, and and that's a prehistoric animal. So, like I said, we believe time doesn't exist the way we understand time, at least here in the third dimension. So, moving on from this, we end up going to, or they end up walking around, and they get to this area right here. Once again, the Iroquois Technology got a hit. This place is extremely active. And if you look right over here against the wall, there is what appears to be a figure of a young boy that's pressed up against the wall wearing a cap on his head. And what's interesting, when we go to another frame, we also get a hit right here to the left of him. So that one was actually a stronger hit than the shadow of the little boy there. So when we zoomed in, that's what we captured. This gentleman here that you see that has this thick mustache, both eyes looking straight up. He looks, like he's either Greek or Italian. That's how he looks to us. And for some reason, he's leaning back. And the reason he's leaning back is because he's actually in a wheelchair. And this would be the only second time in CPI history that we actually ever captured someone in a wheelchair. And he's leaning back, he's looking up, and the last person we captured in a wheelchair had a really old wheelchair, wooden wheelchair with a really high back and almost looked like a rocking chair. And this would be the second one. So this is a good catch. It'll take a minute for your eyes to focus before you can really get a good look. And you can see his jawline. You can see he's got like a little cleft in his chin and a big thick mustache and a long kind of narrow nose and kind of a long face though. But to us, he looks like he's Greek, more than like Italian though. And moving on from there, they go to this room, and they're looking around, and they see this area over here of white. It looks like it's almost like a netted area. I don't know, maybe they had like a bed in there, and maybe someone had some type of disease where they didn't want mosquitoes biting them and they're going out to affect other people. I don't know. It's hard to tell exactly what that is there. But the Iroquois Technology actually got a hit right on the other side of that net. And if you look right here, you can kind of see there looks to be someone or something standing there. So we go and we use the dynamic filtration, and it's funny because just like when we use a dynamic filtration on veiling glare, like when we have a dark shadow and we want to know what the person looks like that's behind that dark shadow. The dynamic filtration will remove that veiling glare. Interesting enough, in this case, it actually removes the netting. You really can't see the netting, but the woman comes up clearly, and you can see her here, and then we circled her here, and there you go. It looks like a woman to us. I don't know what else it could be but that. But like I said, the dynamic filtration brought it out, and the Iroquois Technology hit on it. So they go from there, and they end up going up to, I guess, the next level up from wherever they are. And here is, some of you may have already seen this image here. And there's a lady that actually pokes her head out right there. And the Iroquois Technology gets a hit on that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Just barely she pokes her head out, but it was enough for the Iroquois Technology to notice it. So once they get up there, they had, I guess, been in this room at some point earlier. And when you watch, and when you go to the link below and you go back and actually watch this, you can tell that they edited and they actually had put this before the later clip when they were actually in here prior to this. So they kind of got them confused. This clip comes up first, and then next is the clip where they were actually in this room before that. So this one guy's asking the other guy, he says, "Hey, did you shut that door like that?" And guy's like, "No." He's like, "One door I came through, but I didn't." I guess what they're saying is, where he's asking is, did you layer that white door over top of the wood door, the brown wood door? And I believe he's saying no, he didn't. So what's interesting is so this kid in the burgundy, he goes up to investigate the door, and as he moves forward, right here, a guy dips down. He's standing up at the moment, and as soon as this guy goes to move, he dips down. And what's interesting, if you look at this guy, he's looking to the left. It's almost like he heard him move. I mean, as soon as he gets there, he looks to the left, and that's when the dynamic filtration, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit on him right when he goes to move and he goes to duck down, and that's when that kid looks to the left. But of course, he doesn't see anything. And what's odd, that the entity, you probably can't see. It's very difficult. It looks like he's leaning. He's squatted down, and he's actually leaning his elbows up on the table. You know what I mean? Just watching him go across. But as far as we could tell, there's no table or anything over there. So I'm not really sure what he's leaning on. I don't know if they have the ability to lean on something that still has the essence of something that was there for many, many years. Like if a table's there for 10, 15 years, does it leave an essence that we can't see, that of course we will walk right through, but the entities can still use to set on, to lead on, or whatever. I mean, that's just very interesting. That's not even really part of our research. We've never even considered that. But this is actually how our research works. We see something that kind of doesn't make sense, and then we start looking into it, and then we go back and we look at other evidence to see if we see that something similar has occurred at another location. But he's got his arms crossed, and we actually, in the video, we can actually track his movement. We see him move like 3 or 4 times. One time he takes I think his left arm that's underneath his right. If you think about how I Dream of Jeannie, she crosses her arms, and that's kind of what he's doing, but he's leaning on a table. But then he takes his left arm and places on top of his right arm, like he's almost getting comfortable as this kid walks over to this door. So moving on from there, here's another look at it. And so you'll just have to go to the link below and watch it, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. So they end up leaving that room, and they end up going into this next room, and once again the Iroquois Technology gets a hit, and it gets a hit directly behind this door. So what we do, we end up zooming in, applying the dynamic filtration, and this is what we get. And you can see there's 2 clear faces right there. One is more of a brownish looking face that looks like a white guy, and he's got more color to him. And then to the right is a more of a, like, Motley Crue type of guy, that's there with a very long narrow face. And we talk about colors of death, where the one to the left most likely was probably just killed. The one to the right probably died of some type of poisoning or overdose or something like that. The one to the left could have died in his sleep. He could have had a heart attack. But what happens when you have heart attacks and you go through any type of sickness and illness? It takes your color away from you. So most people at the moment of death, lose their color. But people who die of sudden death continue their color or still have their color. So you can generally tell, someone who died of a long illness, they'll have that bluish or that very charcoal gray look. People who die of drug overdose and stuff, they'll be bluish or cyanotic looking, as we call it. And so that's the difference in the two faces that you see there. But that was a good hit. So moving on. So they end up going up to another flight of steps, and they get to this door here right to the right. And as soon as they go to turn, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit through the glass into that room. And when we zoom in and look, you can actually see what looks like a person in there. So we go ahead and apply the dynamic filtration, and this is what we get. And there's a blank-faced man, could be a woman, that's actually looking out through the glass. And you can see the wires, just like any elementary high school, used to have. I don't know what they have now. But that glass that's designed, if it shatters, the shards don't go everywhere. And that's a great catch right there. And it hit, soon as they made that turn, it hit on there. So that was pretty cool. And so they end up going into that same room. They go through the door and they go into that same room. And over there, they see a doll. Well, later on, they end up going to the end of the hallway and they end up coming back. And this time, you can see the doll's been moved. Well, who moved the doll? Well, let's just go back a couple frames. I would say this gentleman, this man or woman, whatever it is, did it. Because that's who's in that room. I mean, she literally or he literally looks out through the glass. They walk in there, they go to the right, and then they discover that doll. They end up leaving that room, going way down the hallway, go into another room, and they come back through there. I guess this is the only way in and out of that ward, I guess. And so they end up, making their way back. And then when they come right back, that's when they look and go, hey, that doll's been moved. This gentleman, the older guy who's there, he wasn't with them when they first went in there. And he's like, you probably kicked it or whatever. Once again, people denying what they know. Those people, those two kids knew that doll was over to the left farther. They know that. This guy comes in, he wasn't there, he never saw it, and his duty is, in his mind, is to convince them they didn't see what they saw. Again, people, when you think you see something, most likely you're right. Most likely you're right. You have to go back and look at your footage. But that doll definitely moved. It was definitely over. And, I just showed you the proof of that. So they moved from there. And so they split up at this point. Mm-hmm. So the one kid decides to go down into this bathroom. So they get down there and he makes a right and he turns and he starts to record in to the mirror there. And immediately the Iroquois Technology gets a hit right here to the right. And you can see there is a dark entity that looks like he's wearing a hat. That's bizarre because it almost looks like he's wearing a Long Ranger mask. I remember the Long Ranger just had the mask that it just kind of covered around his eyebrows and just around his orbital sockets there. That's kind of what this guy looks like. I don't know why, unless he was like a bank robber or was committing some heist and he was killed while committing that heist. And that actually would make sense. And I can't remember what year that the Long Ranger came out, but I could see a criminal, committing a crime with a Long Ranger style hat. I mean, think about it. If it was popular at the time, somebody's kid has a Long Ranger mask. The father, is going out to do a job and thinks it's a great idea to take the Long Ranger mask. And by the way he's dressed, that would make sense. He looks like he's from that 1950, 1960s era, based on how he's dressed. So that could be something that's possible. And what's interesting is something like this is where our research would come in handy, because we would say to the police, give us any crimes that occurred with someone in the Baltimore area that was killed while committing a crime wearing a Long Ranger mask. And interesting enough, it may come up, and we may know exactly who that person is. Do we know that now? No, we don't know. Do we know it's a mask? No, we don't. But that's what it appears like that he's wearing. So this is the first image where we get a hit. And remember, it'll get a hit on each frame. So as it goes to the very next frame, even though not much has changed, it continues to get another hit. And you can see him. Now, to let you know, we have already applied the dynamic filtration, and that's why it's as intense as it is. I mean, if it was that intense, the guy would have saw it. So I forgot to tell you that. And then we go to the last frame, and you can see he's actually changed a little bit. He's almost like he's wearing more of a suit. The mask on his face, you can't see as clearly. The shirt, it looks like he's wearing like more of a light blue shirt. So remember, these entities move together, and at a minimum, they move in threes. So whoever this is the second guy. The Long Ranger guy, the mobster guy. He's transitioned, and now this guy's come up and taken his place. And my guess is, if he had recorded in the mirror long enough, we would have saw whoever the third person is. But they all move in a minimum of three. They can move in a lot more than that, but generally 3 is the bare minimum that they can move around in. And you can see, here's the image where he turns around, and you can see directly behind him. And there it is. That's directly behind him. There is nobody or anything behind him that would match this and that image that we see, that dark image in the mirror. There's nothing behind him. This is all it is right there. So that kind of gives you, wonder, like, what is going on in that mirror. So he ends up leaving that area, and he ends up making his way back. And he makes his way back because he hears a noise coming from that bathroom where he just was. And he goes back, and here on the wall, just right here to the right, there's a timer. And it's for a sauna that's actually back in there. And he asks the other guy, he's like, hey, did you turn this sauna on? And he's like, no. So do we know who did it? Well, we have an idea. We have an idea that the mobster and the other 2 guys that he's probably hanging with is responsible for that. Why? Because they're trying to scare him out of there. The person in the other room who moved the doll, we saw a picture of him or her. I can't tell if it's a man or a woman who moved that. So this is what they do. And remember, they're moving up. And every time you move higher and higher in these buildings, more stuff happens, because we truly believe that all of these entities in there is a hierarchy that's in that place. Somebody is running it. The baddest dude or woman in that place is running that place. And most likely they are at the highest point that's out there. And so they're trying to stop them from getting up higher, because everyone sees them going up and up and up the step. They're going from room to room, and they're moving higher. And remember, we saw this. Where did we see this last? Oh, yeah, we saw it in Ireland. The same thing happened. Even though I didn't show going up on the roof, because we kind of ran out of time there, even though we just had one more place to go. But, we did get some hits. But, it's always important. We have the link below for you guys to go. If you have any questions about what happens next, that's what the links are for. The links are to go in there. Now, if we don't have time, and we won't have time to show you, what we discovered in the next thing, that's just kind of the way it is. Sometimes we try to catch it in the very next episode if we have time. But like this episode that I'm doing right now, there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's get back to that. Moving on. So they're moving on, and they get to an area for some reason. I don't know if this place was painted numerous times. I mean, or they use extremely cheap paint. I don't know what makes paint peel in this form. Um, some rooms it's like that, other rooms it's not. So it might be just the type of paint that they, maybe a lead based paint they use and peel this way. I remember when I was young, paint chips were something that small children would eat quite often. They used to have public service announcements about that when you were a kid. They told all the parents, don't let your kid eat paint chips from walls. So my guess is whatever that lead-based paint was is probably the reason why, and that's probably why we see it peeling this way. But so, anyways, they come around a corner, and Iroquois Technology gets a hit right here on the left side of the wall, and so right there, you see to us what looks like a woman. You can see the hand, you can see the face, and you can see the legs and the feet. And what's interesting, as soon as they move a little farther, this is what it looks like. Just paint chips peeling. Everything disappears. But when you go back, here's a different look of it. You can see that there's clearly a woman standing there for two reasons. Number one, the Iroquois Technology hit on it. Number two, we applied a dynamic filtration. It did pull a little bit of that image of that woman out. And when you get to her face area here, you can almost see through her hair into the side of her face. It's very interesting. So that is definitely a good hit. So moving on from there. So this kid, he goes upstairs by himself. He goes up to the next level by himself, and apparently while he's up there, a door moves. So he comes tearing down, and when he comes tearing down, it's so funny that he runs past and says, "Man, the door moved. The door's moved up there." And so as he's going by here, the Iroquois Technology gets a hit in this window, this little window pane here on the other side of that door, and right there you can see the face, the grayish face of a woman, someone that clearly had died from what we would think some type of illness or disease because of the color of her face. Because listen, humans really don't look that way normally. Either you're white and have either white skin or pale skin or yellowish skin from being maybe jaundice, or you're African American, Native American, whatever. No one has grayish blue skin like that. And if you see that, and if we're right about what we believe, you look the way you're going to look at the moment of death for eternity. So that would be the color of her, not now because she's dead. That's the way she would look at the moment of death. So that means her skin looked that way, at least for, let's say, the last half hour of her life. And if she looked that way, you can imagine, all the different things that could affect you to give you that type of color of skin before death. Anyway, so that's what we see. So as he runs past the window, you actually get a better look. She actually turns her head and she looks at him, and once again, it's a new frame. So the Iroquois Technology gets a hit. So that is a good hit. We didn't have to use any dynamic filtration because you can see her. You can see her hair. You can see her face. You can see that she's turned and looked at him. So the best part is this guy. This guy's face. He is just like, you saw what up there? And listen, I feel for this guy because that would be me, right? I'm going to be somewhere, some point, with a bunch of kids who are, only in their teens or, at least they're probably early 20s. Like I said, he's probably in his late 40s. And he's there, he's a little heavy set, a little overweight, probably hadn't been to the gym in a while. If he does, he's probably just started back. And he's probably thinking, all right, this kid just ran down the steps. One more noise, and both of those kids are leaving that place. And you know that by the time he even gets off that floor, both of those kids will be 3 floors down, leaving that place, and he'll be left in there alone. And how do I know that? Because that's the look that you get when you feel like you're starting to get older and you're with a bunch of kids that are spry and fast and, and have no aches and pains because they haven't had a chance to do a lot in life yet. Because you get that look on your face right there. So the kids run in, so they start talking. And what's interesting is, if you look at this door right here and nobody pays attention, while they're talking, that door begins to move, right? And here's just 2 frames of it, here and here, right? You can see He looks like he's moving the camera a little bit. Of course he is, because he's holding it in his hand. But what you're seeing is you can see that door is actually moving slowly. When you go back and watch the video, you'll be able to see it move. So what's cool about it, who's moving it? Well, if you look right here, you see the shadow of a person who has a hat on. So you can see the head, you can see the point of a hat. And what's interesting, the point of that hat looks like the backside of a trooper's hat. Um, there's something that we discovered in here that we decided not to show. But I'll just tell you, and we're really cautious of this, and I think it's for good reason that we're cautious. This is another thing that we have to be careful of. Downstairs, we end up capturing what we believe is an image of a state trooper. It looks like a state trooper. The hat looks like a state trooper. He's wearing that looks like a winter coat that the state trooper. And remember, this is Maryland, so we're talking about like a Maryland state trooper or a trooper in Maryland to us. It's not a great picture, but it looks like a trooper to us. So how we do our investigations in these situations, we basically just view the evidence, and the evidence is okay. We have a trooper. He looks like he's white. He looks like he's wearing a winter coat, and he looks like he's wearing gloves. So we know that if we're right about who he is, he most likely died in the winter months. And so he could have died in one of two ways. Troopers get hit by cars a lot on traffic stops out on 95. You know, when I was in Maryland, you know, there was troopers that were getting hit a lot, especially like in the 90s for some reason. And and so you have to figure out, okay, if it's a trooper, let's look for a trooper that was killed during a traffic stop, because in Maryland they don't do a lot of domestic, so most of them do traffic unless you get out to like the Eastern Shore and maybe out past Frederick or something that way. They may use state police for what here in Florida they use the sheriff's for in Orlando Police Department, but primarily in in Maryland, state police usually do just traffic. So usually when they're killed in line of duty, not always, some of them are involved in shootouts and stuff, but it usually has to do with some type of traffic stop. And anyways, we end up capturing an image of a police officer years ago with the dynamic filtration and Iroquois Technology. And it literally took me 5 minutes to figure out who it was. And when I went back and took the image that I took from the police department where they honored him and put it together with the image that we had, it was a perfect match. This guy had only been on the police force for, I think, a year. He was basically a rookie. And he was getting off a bus, or they had like a homeless man on the bus, and someone told him, I think he was walking the beat, and said, hey, there's a homeless man and we'll get off the bus. So he goes over to tell him, and he shoots him like a 22, and the man was dead before, or the policeman was dead before he hit the ground. How do we know? Because he still has his hat on, he still has everything on, just like he would. You know, it's not like they took him to the hospital, they took off his uniform and all of that. So we can tell when they're still wearing their hat, meaning they died instantly. 911 hadn't gotten there yet, or you know, they had passed before 911 got in there and took off their hat. And so we did find what we believe is a trooper. So we decided not to show him. But looking at this, I think this might be the trooper as well, because that looks like the back of the same hat that we saw. And we did research, and we found a trooper that was killed in a cold month back in the 90s, and it was a traffic stop, and it matches what we saw there. So we decided not to show it. We'll just tell you guys, but we decided because these are policemen, and you know, this was only back in the 90s, so he had a small child and stuff, and you know, was married, so these people are still living. So we don't want to make a channel where we're capturing things. And like I said, we still don't know if any of this stuff is real. We just know our program shows us images. And we don't want to be wrong that it is real. And we don't want his family that might be, or at some point may look at this and be horrified if what we captured is that trooper. I mean, what would you think? You're like, man, I thought my husband or my son or whatever is in heaven and they're not. What does that mean? We don't know. We just talk about what it means, but we don't honestly know. We're just doing the best that we can to bring you the information that we can bring you. So we believe that what we found downstairs that we decided not to show, and we have never showed the other policemen either, because of that. But that looks like the backside, possibly of a trooper hat, and we did see one downstairs. So the next frame there, you can see that he's gone. And when we go back and look at the guys, now the person who is filming this entity right there, he's not filming his own shadow. So we know it's not the cameraman. So the only other two people is the kid that's wearing the hoodie and the older guy. And they're both right here. So you can see neither of them are wearing a hat. So it can't be them. So that is a entity that is pushing that door. Fascinating. So they end up hearing. So they end up going upstairs. Okay, and he goes up and he shows them the door that that he saw that was moving. Of course, it gets up there, it's not moving, but they do hear something going on while they're up there. So the gentleman, the older gentleman, turns, and as he turns to get out this hallway, the Iroquois Technology gets to hit right in front of him, right there. You see what looks like a woman and a face of something right there. It's fascinating. And look at the very next image. So remember what that hallway looks like, and remember what that entity looks like right there. And now look at this. Right here, that is the same area. There's nothing burgundy looking that looks like it has a collar that's there. Let me show you that again. You see the guy with the hoodie in front of him, and then you see the older gentleman here in black, but right in front of the burgundy, you see almost a purplish color with this dark area, and then you see a head sticking out of there. But when you look at this, there's nothing in that hallway that even matches that. So we decide to put it together, and this is what we got here. You can see the purple, and he or she, whatever, we don't know, looks like it's got like a white stripe across the jacket, and then there is like a white, something jetting out there that's from his arm, that the dynamic filtration picked up. So we don't know if that's spirit energy or whatever, because it's hitting. It's not pinpointing that much. We already know that entity's there, and it's all in the same frame, so it's not like we can go to the very next frame and check it or not, or we can't, I should say. So yeah, so it definitely looks like a woman there, and you can see the arm there, and there's a white stripe on her jacket, and it looks purple for some reason. And then right here to the right, this is on the left is right before he fills up the space in that hallway, and then the image on the right is after he's passed that open space on the hallway. So he's actually right to the left, even though you can't see him. So he's just crossed in front of her. Let's just call her back there. And in that split second, it goes from that scene looking like that to nothing being there. Fascinating. But anyways, the dynamic filtration, the Iroquois Technology got a hit on her either way. And that's the best we could get her out after we're using the dynamic filtration there. That's pretty good. You can almost see the shine in her hair there. So they end up going from there, and then there's a stairs that leads up to the roof. And when they get up to the roof, we get a hit right here on this edge. And if you look closely on this edge, there looks like a bunch of little heads that have poked out on the edge of that building there. You see this little curve area here, and then you see 1, 2, 3, 4, almost all the way down. You see these heads. Well, when you zoom in closely, they're actually spirits, and they all have their mouth open like they're screaming. Why are they screaming? because we think they're part of this huge entity that's on this roof. And it's very difficult to see. The Iroquois Technology got a hit on it. And right here, you'll see two eyes, and this is the head. And let me outline it for you. That'll probably be easier. And this whole area here is one large entity. First time that we've ever seen anything like this all together in one. But clearly, all of those smaller entities are part of him. He's probably made of 20, 30 people, who knows. He is definitely the king of the hill. He is the reason why everyone below him has been trying to keep him, or keep everyone from getting up to the roof, because that's pretty much what his orders probably were. And that's probably in any house or any large institution like this. You probably have that, in any jail you usually have the baddest dude. The difference is in jails, they can keep them segregated. In this case, you can't keep these people segregated, so they're free to roam pretty much wherever they want. And if they're taking over, they're taking over. So here you go right here, and here's a better look at him. He looks like he's almost wearing like a rain slipper. He made it yellow just so you can see it. But it almost looks like he's wearing a hoodie that's almost a rain slipper. At least by the way it's colorized. And here's the last image right here. And of course, if you look at this image, the Iroquois Technology doesn't get a hit. It's just a roof. So you know what happened is, by the time these kids got up there and that other gentleman got up there, this guy's pissed. He rolls out of there. He's going down there, and he's probably taking care of everybody that allowed them to get that far up there. And that's why he probably left the roof now. But yeah, there's nothing up there. The Iroquois Technology doesn't hit on anything after this. So anyway, so that's our show. It kind of went long again. I'm sorry. Some of this stuff, we have so much information that we get, and it's just so much stuff I want to share. And what's good about it, hopefully this stuff will be around for years. So if you can't watch it all at once, you can watch a little bit at a time. You can come back and watch it. So don't feel obligated if you can't make it through some of our longer shows. Hopefully, we'll get some shows where, they won't be as long here. We won't have as much information. But, if the information's there, we really want to share it with you. Again, sorry about not sharing the trooper with you. That's just something that, we decide we don't want to get caught up in any controversy. It would be like us literally, discovering Kobe Bryant right now and putting it on our channel. I mean, that would be horrible to get something like that, and nor would we even attempt to. So that's it, and I will see you guys next Friday. Ciao.